What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and we have a new video from the D&D team called Running Monsters in Dungeons and Dragons. And normally this might not be a video I would normally make content on, but it's interesting because it's the first time in a while and the first appearance of Justice Armin in one of these kind of videos. Normally, it's Todd Kenrick interviewing someone like Jeremy Crawford or Chris Perkins, but Justice recently joined the D&D team like over about a year ago or so, right around the time of Radiant Citadel. And many of us know Justice, whether it be from the internet, from work done on the DMs Guild over the years. I've met Justice in person a handful of times, and it's just really cool to see a new, fresh face, and I'm excited to see where this interview goes and what kind of information we're going to get. And like I said, it's just refreshing to see somebody new. I swear to you, this counter worked literally before I clicked record. But if you like what I do here and you haven't subscribed to the channel already, consider doing so. All that stuff goes to help me, even though it just seems like a little simple click for you. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. Sorry, I was a little loud.
From like a design standpoint, what is your favorite monster? And as a dungeon master, how do you run them? Like, why do you enjoy using that monster? It can be any monster in D&D.
Well, I think the honorable mention here is dragons.
Everyone
Because
likes
they're
running a
in
dragon.
They're in the name, and I think that, for me, I'm always like, oh, if there's gonna be a dragon, it has to be a moment.
Yeah.
But I think some of my favorite monsters in D&D are the ones that are unique to D&D. The ones that came out from like a weird little story or a game of telephone from an old mythology book, like the Modrons, for example. They have that story behind them that they're shaped the way they are because they look like dice, and somebody saw the dice and they were like, this should be a creature. Let's make this. They look weird. They have that little fleshy face to them while also being they make you uncomfortable, and they're fun to play. But I think, the Beholder, the Displacer Beast, I think the creatures that are uniquely D&D are often my favorite. I also have a soft spot for giants because I think that's so classic fantasy. I was never a tall child, and there's something admirable about being a very big creature. But I think just the wonder of fantasy, of hearing something stomping in such a way that trees split as this thing moves through a forest. You can feel the ground rumbling. When they talk, their breath is like gusts of wind. They have lungs the sizes of barrels. And I think there's something literally larger than life there that is awesome and admirable. And I think a lot of cultures have a giant of their own. That there's so many different ways to play a giant, that they don't have to just be a big cyclops. They might be a noble. They might not like fighting. They might carry a stack of books. Each book is the size of your house. And I think it's just fun to think, like that old nursery rhyme of the woman that lives in the shoe. Like,
Right.
Whose shoe is that? Like, where did you get this shoe? And like, when everything, I lived in Texas for a while. Everything's bigger in Texas. But nothing is as big as a giant, except maybe big techs.
So, interesting. I like the concept of talking about running, if you're going to play D&D, the monsters that are uniquely Dungeons and Dragons, which sometimes I feel like some of us may take for granted because we play with a lot of third-party stuff. We play Pathfinder, you play other fantasy-related games, and there are, like, analogs that are relatively similar to the creature that is originally a D&D thing. Beholder's probably the best one, right? Dragons are universal. Wolves, griffins, anything that's in mythology can be in anything. Obviously, like dragons, but the Beholder is truly unique to Dungeons and Dragons. And while, again, there may be knockoffs and things here and there. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of giants myself. I don't know. They feel kind of mundane to me in the grand scheme of the world of the magic of Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, they are much larger than your average player character, and that's cool, and you can do fun things with it. And I have run my fair share of giants in the games that I've played, but when you have so many other weird, unique, creepy, disturbing, alien-like monsters, giants just feel a little humdrum to me.
Giants are, I love giants.
Although I don't know if giants are only being mentioned because the next book is literally called like, you know, Big B's, giant book, whatever the hell it's called. I always forget because it's been pushed back so many times. But we know it's a giant based source book, so I wonder if that's like we're teeing it up. I don't know.
For all the same reasons. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like everyone can kind of like instantly click in when you hear the stomping, right? Or the deeper voice you can use when you're role playing one. But like also they have items on them that
Yes.
are just bigger. They may have a tankard that, if it falls, you're trapped. Like you're in prison,
Yes.
and they may not even be aware of your existence. Like it kind of like puts things in a interesting perspective
Yes.
of like you are now an ant.
Yes, yeah.
And you may not matter. And you're amongst these giants.
Yeah, I love it. And it's also like there's something familiar there. I love playing with new players. I ran a game for my dad a few years back, and it was interesting. Some of us who've been playing this game so long, we're so steeped in things, we're looking for, where's the next turn? How are we going to turn something on its head? What's the twist? But for a new player, everything is new here.
Yeah.
Like when they see a displacer beast, they're like, "Oh, that's weird. That cat has 6 legs." And then it's like blurry, and they're like, "Why is it blurry though?
Yeah.
What's happening here?" And you can surprise them a lot easier. But I think giants are fun because there's something familiar there, where it's easier to slowly walk someone down the D&D path of like, "Oh, here's something familiar that you're gonna know."
Yeah.
You know fantasy, you know what a giant is, and then suddenly
something
you're
to
looking
that.
at a beholder and it's floating and it has like all these eyes, and they're like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
That's
That's a good point. Like everyone can understand dragons. Like that's such a part of so many different cultures, and then giants are very much in the same way. You can imagine a big person.
Yes.
There's a lot of fun to be had.
I feel like somebody explained it to me once when like there was like a little kid and they like, I don't know if they stubbed their toe or they scratched their knee or something, and they were crying, and I remember, or maybe it was something I read online, but somebody said something like, when a child is happy or a child cries, it is literally the worst thing that has ever happened to them at that point. Like they had never experienced that before. That joy they feel is the first time they've ever experienced that thing. When they try a new fruit, they've never had that fruit before. And I think like a lot of us in like nerddom are like, I wish I could go back and watch this thing for the first time. And new players are like children in that regard. Like the first time they see that creature is the first time they're ever going to see that creature. And every time you give them that first, you could potentially burn a memory, in their mind in regards to this game. I still remember one of the first creatures that we ever fought in D&D was the Thri-kreen.
Thri-kreen, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And when I think of a Thri-kreen, I think of this adventure that my DM ran in Utah, where I was in a jungle, and I think of Thri-kreen as jungle people. But they're not from jungles. They're like often in like Dark Sun and stuff. But that's the one that's in my memory. So.
And that's kind of the responsibility of being a good dungeon master is this maybe someone's first time playing.
Yeah.
It's that is an awesome responsibility. You want them to have a good time. How do you teach people to dungeon master?
You teach through seeing. I think, blessed be the dungeon masters that have never played or have only played a couple times. Like who grab a book or watch a video or just want to learn on their own and then put a group together. But I think oftentimes the best way to teach, a dungeon master how to play is to DM for them and then ask them to take the reins for a one shot. So, many times it can give your DM a break. You run a one shot or you continue the story for a session, run a side quest, do a beach episode or a shopping episode or something, and have fun. But I mean, DMing is rewarding and enjoyable, and you don't have to know everything, and nobody knows everything. So a lot of it is just giving it a chance, feeling it out with that group. Run things that are already written makes it a lot easier when there's an answer. When you're not making everything up, you might be running a starter set or a book or something that we create. You can improvise within that box rather than having to improvise everything that they could possibly get their hands on. So,
Like I said, I really didn't know what we were going to get in that video, and I actually really liked it. And it brought up a lot of interesting things to me, and I mean, I'm already feeling nostalgic about things as we speak. But they touched on that concept about the concept of a child first experiencing things, and that is a very powerful thing. And I can speak to this in a both positive and a negative way. So I will, and kind of an in between, if you will. So when someone gets a chance to play Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, whether you're going to be playing with them or you're going to be running it for them, I don't want to mount pressure on people and add, more tension or things where it doesn't need to be, because that's not my intention. But as was mentioned here, that first experience can, in some instances, make or break that person's interest in Dungeons and Dragons going forward. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience, one, I always wanted to play D&D, so like I had that desire already there. But I remember vividly my first session, and we fought werewolves. Was one of the first things that we fought, and um, it's every second of that game is burned into my mind. And if you're curious, let me know. Maybe I'll make like a separate like D&D story time, like my first ever session of Dungeons and Dragons, and tell you about what happened. I mean, it was, I don't know, over 10 years ago, over 20 years ago almost at this point. But I'd love to tell you about it if you're interested. But I had such a good time. There was no question that this was going to become a part of my life going forward, and obviously here we are today. But then I remember I was so excited to introduce my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, to Dungeons and Dragons. And our one friend said, "Hey, I want to run a game. Do you guys want to play?" And I was like, "This is awesome. So excited. I don't have to run it. Like we get to play. We can play together. It'll be great." And it was 3.5, so consider that. But like our character wasn't exactly, it was a monk in 3.5, which she picked it, which it is what it is. Um, and I was a little less knowledgeable about the mechanics completely because I only had my experience to go off of. And I love my buddy, but he was not the best DM, and it really kind of just soiled the entire D&D experience for her. Now she's played a handful of times since then, but that first time didn't really hook her, you know, and it kind of burnt her out on it, and she was just like, "I don't have any interest in this game at all. I don't know why you guys like it so much." And that was really disheartening to me. And like, even though it was my friend who was DMing, I still feel like, I don't know, it's my fault in some way. And I've also done kind of what I said, it was kind of an in between, where some people had experienced Dungeons and Dragons for the first time in a less than stellar situation. And then I was like, "Hey, how about I run it? Like, hey, please don't let this change the way you see this game. It can be so much more than this. If you're willing to give it another try, I'd love to run a game for you in sort of the what I would consider like a more realistic traditional Dungeons and Dragons sense." And I've done that for a handful of people because like I sat down at a table with them, whether it was at a game shop or a convention or something like that, and things were just not handled well, right? The game, whether it was the DM had a like a regular group and we were just kind of tacked on and like we had to deal with their inside jokes and kind of just felt on the outside, or the DM had like a story they wanted to tell very specifically and was trying to railroad everybody to go a certain thing and not let anybody think for themselves, or just like playing favorites, all sorts of weird stuff that happens sometimes and can really ruin your experience to D&D. So you also potentially have the opportunity, if someone has that experience and they say, "Yeah, I tried D&D once, but it wasn't really for me. I didn't really like it." This is your opportunity to potentially say, "Well, what didn't you like about it?" And then possibly say, "Would you be willing to give it one more try?" And maybe, just maybe, what you do will be the one that burns that permanent memory in their mind as to why it's so much fun. Because it's funny, again, talking about this a little bit more, sometimes when I get together with my friends that I haven't seen in a long time, who I had played D&D with in the past, we reminisce about those D&D games. And I've watched my wife talk to my other friends' wives or partners or what have you and say, like off to the side, like they're talking about it like it actually happened. And I was like, well, for us, it did. Like we're reminiscing about that one time that so and so messed up and rolled that natural one, or the one time we, captured that shopkeep and took all of his magic items, or whatever it was. We reminisce about that as those though were real things that happened to us in real life, but in a way they did. And those are very real memories and vivid memories for a lot of us. So, yeah, it's D&D can be a really powerful, or any RPG really, can be a really powerful magical experience. And, that first time can kind of make or break it. And it's just really cool. And it was nice to hear, a little insight from folks that are on the design team still kind of have that mentality and that mindset. And it's nice to hear. It kind of, at least, and it's somebody who's not like the pinnacle person in the group. It's someone who's just like, I don't want to say rank and file, but somebody who's part of the design team. We're getting their perspective, and it's nice to hear that this mentality is permeating through the team over at WotC. So anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Let me know if you're curious about my first D&D session. Maybe we'll do another D&D story time video. Anyway, I'll see you all next time.